That brings us to a time when we can address some of your questions. So I'm going to ask all of the folks to come back, and we're going to highlight you so you'll be on screen. And let's tackle some of these very good questions from our audience. And I'm just thrilled to see that we also have representatives from Google Books. So, we're going to let you unmute perhaps and answer some of these if we don't know the answers. But let's start with the question that's a little meta. Is in 2021, the definition of what we mean by book, is that changing? What do you think?
Well, it's been, my first reaction is that we use this general term work, and rather than book, because work is very, covers a lot more territory. So it includes videos and games and all kinds of other potentially digitizable things. But I think that the way we consume the works that we used to call books is different now than it was before, because we've introduced these online environments and these computer-based tools. And so I think we should, in fact, seek to redefine what we mean when we say book, so as to incorporate all of the different ways in which that work can be used, which is far beyond the purely static but wonderful invention of Gutenberg.
Just to add that in special collections, the idea of a book has always been a big question mark, from something like a palm leaf manuscript to a tablet, a cuneiform tablet to a tally stick, a work or a text. These things, these information carriers don't always fit into the traditional idea of a text or a book.
So for me, the thing that I think we want to preserve going forward is the long form narrative, the long form full argument. So not just a TED Talk or just a blog post or an essay, but somebody that really wants to go and argue a point and has the length to be able to go and pull that off. That's the key thing. And by not having these really be woven into the web yet and still sort of in these endless lawsuits, we've got a problem, because that's how society, we think things through. So I think it's very important that at least the long form narrative, whether it's a codex going forward, bound journal, bound paper or not, but long form narratives that are well thought through, single author prognostications of a point of view. I think both in fiction and nonfiction, that's what I would like to see move forward into our digital world.
Well, perhaps it is unfair to ask this group of book-centric folks this question, but one of our audience members asked, how do we address the information needs of mainly oral societies?
Yeah, I was going to, I'm sorry. I was going to kind of connect that to the previous question as well. In my vision, what I'd like to see is long narrative. I agree with you, Brewster. What I think would happen is not so much that, though. I think that we're moving towards very interesting short form everything. We see online, there's a lot of very quick attention, too fast sometimes, and then people delve in. I wonder what this means and how we can adjust to that in the era where your TV speaks to you in a tiny little quick thing, and you have VR and AR, and your fridge suddenly displays information about the nutrition of stuff. There are things that are very quick, and I wonder how we can adjust to that, and then maybe from that send people to a longer form, which I hope will stay, because I agree that it should, but I'm wondering how that will impact the way that we think about knowledge in general, and how that knowledge comes from the books and being distributed to people.
On the smaller, shouldn't step in front of Raj Reddy and Vinsur, but I would like to just tip my hat to Balki and to a lot of the Indians in their digitization project of really focusing on smaller languages throughout India. Even though we didn't have the technology to go and do the OCR on them, they did them anyway, and it's fabulous. That doesn't necessarily get you to the ones that are primarily oral, but now we have the technologies to do some of those recordings and to go preserve them and make use of them. And the Million Books Project, by starting out with not just, let's just do commercially viable things, it's no, let's go and represent all of the world's voices that has set this project and all of us. And Google has done an amazing job of doing OCR and translation on a broad range of languages. But we're still missing OCR on Balinese, for instance, spoken by 3 million. And they've been the first language that I know of that has said everything ever written in Balinese can go online. So we have lots still to do, but it was put in the right cast, I would say, by Raj Reddy and his collaborators and Balki and the Indian group that really did a lot of hard work in the early days.
Bint, would you like to comment?
Yes, thank you. I wanted to make 4 comments. First of all, I draw your attention to Ismail Serageldin, who is the founder of the Library of Alexandria, the 3rd instance of that library, way back in 2000 in Alexandria, Egypt. He has an annual event called The Future of the Book, which I would draw attention to. The second person is Frode Hedlund, who is a protege of Douglas Engelbart, who does an annual event called The Future of Text, and has been inventing new technology in order to make it possible to consume and produce text in ways that are more flexible than traditional. Third, to respond specifically to literacy, the aural, AURAL, consumption of books, either by recorded by humans or even generated by bots, is a way of trying to cope in part with the literacy question. And the last point I offer is that we're seeing an interesting phenomenon at YouTube, which is that people will type in questions either to Google search or YouTube saying, how do I do X for some value of X? And they get a 5-minute video or a 3-minute video or maybe a longer one to answer that question. And so what we're seeing is people using these online environments to get answers to questions when they need them. So this is just-in-time learning. It's not a substitute for intense and long study and long-form content, but it's a very interesting phenomenon for drawing people in to learn more.
Dr. Reddy, you have to unmute.
To me, we shouldn't just limit it to books, or I think there's a lot of knowledge in many different forms. Newspapers, there was a project called 1,000 newspapers or 10,000 newspapers for 10,000 years. It would be great if we can capture every newspaper that's already born digital and keep it for future generations. And I showed you music and video and paintings. All of them are in copyright. The issue is because they're in copyright, they're getting lost, ultimately, because nobody's putting them in a repository, which would ultimately become public domain. Right now, it is not the case. So we need to somehow think, actually, Wikipedia should think, and the public library should think about how do we add these other media, paintings and music and movies into the mix. I think that would be wonderful.
I have another question for this group, and I think it is following up on what Mike Furlow had to talk about. They're saying, sorry, I've lost my question. Oh, how is non-text material being handled for the blind and visually impaired reader? Mike, can you tackle that?
I can try. I mean, I know that my knowledge of this is not complete. So if there are any folks in the audience who want to share more in chat, I would welcome that. I think in the last decade, I've seen a lot more intensive attention paid by publishers and the content industry in general to captioning and description especially let's talk about just published works for a second, a book, finding ways of more richly describing illustrations in a work so that the reader who is sight impaired has an opportunity to better understand what is depicted there and how it illustrates the arguments of the text. This is another version of what you see in PowerPoint now if you're encouraged to put in alt text, right? The trick is that's incredibly expensive, and if in certain fields, like particularly in the sciences and maybe even in art history, for example, the kind of description necessary to be useful in that I think it's really up for grabs, and it's challenging right now for people to find ways of doing that in an affordable manner. Video is similar in that I'm aware of at least a few libraries that have been trying to make headway on machine captioning of video materials that are in their archives for hearing impaired viewers, and that is that's variable depending upon your sound quality there. I mean, I am kind of heartened because I do feel like over the last several years, there's definitely been more attention paid to accessibility in publishing. I don't think it's quite broken through at the commercial level and the major commercial level in the same way it has in the academic side. And I also say that the higher up the chain towards the higher end commercial material you go, the more likely people are looking to protect their assets, as you were, and are maybe less attentive to the needs of some of the users that you see on the ground level there. Anyway, that's sort of my take on that right now. So,
thank you. Anyone else want to tackle that? Okay, go ahead, Vint.
I just put a little note in the chat. One thing that's starting to emerge is an interest in generating audio description for visual materials, as is often now not enough, but sometimes done for videos, for example, so that, or even broadcast television, so someone who's blind can understand what's going on in the field of view. The ability to use text to speech can be an interesting way of assisting there, because you can have a text-based description of what's going on and have it spoken, because we have very good quality text-to-speech, and increasingly we have the ability to translate that text-to-speech into more than the original language, but into other languages as well.
Thank you. I'd like to read a comment from John Oker-Bloom. He writes that one accomplishment of Raj Reddy's Universal Library project that hasn't yet been mentioned is that it was the first to start digitizing historic copyright renewal records after Congress last extended copyright terms. And that led digitization projects more easily identify things that are actually in the public domain, but not obviously so. So Raj's project has done much more than digitize books.
It was actually Brewster that did most of the work.
Oh, no. Okay, so I'm glad to hear John say this, because we got the digitized images from him. And then Project Gutenberg, we made a prize to go and key it all in. And the Project Gutenberg people did all of that. Now Stanford has gone and put a database around it, and it's now used by everybody. And it all sort of been handed off, with no license agreements, no sort of let's sign NDAs. It's just like, no, let's get something done here. I'm now on a committee from the Copyright Office where they're contemplating digitizing those records. It's like, oh, come on. So the community has rallied to do some of this work in a very collaborative way. But John, it's interesting to hear where the images actually came from. I thought they came from you.
Mike, what would you like to add?
I would just add, I want to add to the circle of congratulations wherever they're due on this, all through the chain, because this database this data that eventually made its way into the Stanford database has been something we've been using for 10 years now to research copyright status works that were apparently in copyright, but which in the United States actually were not renewed or never actually had copyright protection. So I think we've reviewed something on the order of about 800,000 works, and more than half of those have been opened up as public domain as a result of that. And all that's been done by individuals volunteering time to do that kind of work. So thanks all the way down to the bottom of the chain on that one.
A little known fact, I do believe that Brewster Kahle coined the term orphan works. And those are works that we're not really sure what the copyright status is. So they hang in a kind of copyright limbo of access. Here's another question. What aren't we digitizing? Liz, do you want to take a crack at that?
Yes, from a special collections perspective, I know some things are a little bit more difficult to offer, things that can't be OCR'd, for example, or items of ephemera. As Michael was saying in his presentation, you know, what even ends up in the library, it has to be in the library in order to get onto the scanning bed, in order to be scanned, and it has to be worth scanning for someone. So as the commenter mentioned, there's elements that are purely oral, but there's also material that might not generally be considered worth scanning, you know, like things that are slips of paper, manuscripts that end up inside of books, posters and flyers that are up for a week and removed, that are not part of the mainstream publishing process, but are part of the cultural history.
As you mentioned, Liz, one of the most popular books from UOT is that knitting patterns book. Like, who's to say what is really going to be of interest to humanity over time? Brewster?
Some of the challenging things right now are things that are licensed and protected with digital copyright, digital protection measures. So I guess in the last award ceremony, Academy Award ceremony, about half of the movies were just stream only. And those are things that will never be in a library collection physically because they may not ever hit DVD. So those are a problem. Social media is kind of an issue. And a lot of the works like some of the important things like textbooks, because they've got so many lawyers all standing around trying to keep people from being able to analyze them. Right? Because we want to be able to analyze these and go through some of the types of work that happened with Random House, but you know, step close to these things and landmines blow up. So often, really culturally important materials are the ones that are going to be denied to the next generation or analyses. It's really not. It's not right.
One thing I'd like to throw in on this, this picks up a little bit on Liz's point about what's not stuff that doesn't ever make it in the library. I want to call out the work of an organization called Documenting the Now, and the folks who are involved with that are also involved with an organization called the Shift Collective. And that is an organization that really works to help communities build their own archives of their own history and their own stories and tell their own stories. It's a really powerful set of work or accumulation of work that they have done. So we're talking about, you know, local micro histories, local communities who are documenting, you know, their own story of evolution, or perhaps, you know, radical political acts that have happened in their presence or have helped shape those communities. Stuff that might not make it into a library, maybe it will at one point, but you know, the point is to help those communities tell their own story and kind of take control of the ability to weave that narrative. And it's a real challenge, I think, to the authority of libraries, archives, and museums. And it's one that I think we would do well to tend to learn from and find ways of supporting as well to the extent we can.
Our next question has to do with authors. Do you have any advice for authors about how to recoup costs and make an income and still make our books available digitally?
Yeah, there are at least two mechanisms that we should look into. One is the idea of a public lending right. If it turns out you created a work that lots of people are accessing, in countries like England, they set aside £4 million annually to kind of track whose books are being checked out and give them a check between £10 to £10,000. I think if someone is creating work that might be interesting to other people, I think you're beginning to see this even here. There's a book by Blum and Cannon and about data science, foundations of data science. They published it for free as a PDF online. And then they are also selling it for a fee as a hard copy. I'm beginning to see more and more of those things where you put it online for free. And in fact, National Academy Press does that. They publish all their reports for free online. You can download them. But if you want a hard copy, you can buy them. So I think there are new regimes that are coming up where people understand internet is actually a marketing device. You're marketing your thing, instead of saying, look inside like Amazon does for 10% of the book or something, you can give them the whole book, and then if they really like it, they will buy it. It's not a big deal.
There are many libraries that want to buy ebooks, and the publishers are saying, no, you cannot buy them. And there are many cases saying they cannot buy them under any license terms at all. So insist, and maybe indie publishers, PM Press, there's others that are now actively selling books to libraries such as the Internet Archive. And we'd like to see more libraries buy books from those publishers that support purchasing. I mean, it may sound kind of wild to go and say, I'm actually like, let's try capitalism here, rather than sort of what it is that's going on right now in the publishing world. And it's screwing authors completely.
So when you check out an ebook from your public library, what's happened is that your public library has taken out a subscription or a license for that book. And oftentimes they'll have to pay per person who checks it out, and there's limits. And once 26 people have checked it out, they no longer have that book. So you can imagine a time 20 years from now when you go to the digital shelves and boy, your book's not going to be on that shelf anymore because it won't be the hot new book that your public library can afford to subscribe to. Just like Netflix is not going to have that movie of 20 years from now. And I think what Brewster is saying is that libraries like the Internet Archive want to be able to buy an ebook and hold that for all time. So those are some of the battles kind of going on right now behind the scenes. Another question is there a wiki that covers all books in general that are not perhaps notable enough to be added to Wikipedia?
OpenLibrary.org attempts to be a wiki of books, and people can add books and change the metadata and the like. And it's specifically built for that purpose, and it's modifiable. It was architected by Aaron Schwartz and is continued to be supported by a user community as well as the Internet Archive.
There's also Wikisource that exists in multiple languages around the world that primarily then transliterates the text back into digital form in the wiki. So that's another option.
Here's a question. Oh, go ahead.
What would be useful, Brewster, is there's supposed to be these 130 million books. If we can at least capture the titles of all the books and titles and authors of all those books, so we can search it and see if there's anything ever published that might be of interest to me. And then we can figure out how to go about getting it digitized and whatever we need to do. And many things might be already born digital. And so the question is, how do we get the list of all the books?
Here's a provocative question. What about the blockchain and NFTs? How does this play into the future of books and content?
I'm going to take the provocative stance of I'm pro NFTs, registering things on blockchains, going and making materials more available in a more distributed way. The Internet Archive has been a big proponent of decentralized web technologies, where it's kind of going backwards to the libraries. Publishers would go and publish a book, and it would be bought by libraries, and it would be placed in those libraries. So if any of those libraries happen to disappear, we're still likely to have another copy someplace else. That's not the way the web works. The web works such that it's on one place. And if it goes down or they change the URLs, it's effectively gone. And the Wayback Machine is a kludge to try to fix that broken nature of the web. And the idea of the decentralized web, whether it's Filecoin, the blockchain technologies, the NFT is just the simplest, stupidest little demo project, right? It's just trying to register a hash code. So I think it's just the beginning of what we'd like to see happen is decentralizing the storage so you can find things from multiple places. Going and having it in just one place, even if the Internet Archive is kind of awesome, don't depend on just one place. And the blockchain technologies is good. The hash technologies that are underneath things like BitTorrent are fabulous. Let's go and invest more into these technologies to make it so that we register things. Oh, and yeah, let's fix that damn power problem. That's just dumb. Let's just fix that.
So it's Vint. So Brewster and I usually align, but here we don't, and we part ways to some extent. In this case, I'm not persuaded that blockchain is the solution to everything. It's sort of the 21st century Brill cream. I do take the point that distribution of copies is a good idea because that does create resilience as long as you can find it, which is important. The problem with blockchain is that it doesn't contain the object, it just contains references to it. And so it's still the digital thing is someplace else, not in the blockchain itself. So we should be careful about distinguishing that from, say, the BitTorrent notion where there are multiple instances to draw from. As to NFTs, I am unpersuaded that this is anything other than the tulip craze.
The tulip craze, yes. I wanted to add something to this because Vint and Brewster were there when we launched the first Decentralized Web Summit in 2016. And blockchain is one thing, but there's also now decentralized storage, like Storj and Filecoin. And so when Filecoin launched its mainnet, we put on that rocket ship, they like to use rocket metaphors, we put the LibriVox books and the Prelinger films. So should anything happen to the Internet Archive, now across thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of computers, the LibriVox audiobooks live on. So we are doing some major experimentation. We're the first actually to look at what it means to do decentralized storage of the actual items at scale. So stay tuned for that. Well, I think that it is time to turn our attention to what we call the big bet. Now, I came to understand that Raj Reddy is not only famous for AI, not only famous for the Million Book Project, he is famous for something called the big bet of the future. He will make a bet with his friends that in 10 years or 20 years, such and such a thing will happen. And people actually put up real money or real dinners against Raj's vision. So we want to play this game today to close out our time together. So Raj, we want you to make a prognostication, a bet for 2031. What do you think will happen to digital books or digital libraries by 2031?
I wanted Brewster to make this bet because I may not be around, but I'm happy to make it. You may not be able to collect it from me, but we'll see. The thing that many of us have been fighting is the copyright problem and the lawsuits and so on. And I think we are at a point where the society is beginning to realize that the current copyright law is broken. And in a world of digital copyrights, we need, something better. So my aspiration and bet is in 10 years, by 2031, we'll have a frictionless, streamlined copyright regime in which authors can extend the copyright indefinitely if they want by paying a prescribed fee. If Disney wants Mickey Mouse, they can extend it beyond 100 years, but they may have to pay $1 million in registration fee at the 100 years. But there is, at the beginning, there'll be no fee to register. The second is users of copyrighted material can get access to the material for fair use in less than 5 minutes and not be worried about, lawsuits and so on. And by paying a required fee as specified by the metadata for single copy use. If the copyright is not registered with the National Digital Library Copyright Registry with relevant metadata and mandatory digital deposit, then the fines for copyright violations of unregistered copyright material should be nominal, like $1. Yes, you get a moral victory, but you're not going to get a lot of money out of it. This will put all the lawyers out of business. And that's okay with me. Not all the lawyers, but at least copyright lawyers that are suing, Google and Internet Archive. So that, and the bet is that the community of the people speakers here will kind of either agree or disagree that this will happen in 10 years, that we'll have a streamlined copyright regime. And the losers will treat the winners to the dinner at the most expensive restaurant in San Francisco, chosen by the winners. And they get to choose where we all get to eat. So since may not be around, I'm going to send $1,000 to Brewster, and he can pay my share.
All right. I'm going to place a bet that in 2031, Raj Reddy is around, and he's going to have to pay up on his bets anyway. But here it is, folks. The creation of a national digital registry where there's mandatory copyright registry. And if you want to extend the copyright, you can do it for 100 years as long as you pay a fee. But the real bet is that we're going to make a streamlined, frictionless copyright regime so that any user online within 5 minutes for a fee can get access to the great works of humanity.
Right.
That is Raj's decade-long vision. Vint, what do you have to say about that?
I will take the bet negative. In other words, I will bet against Raj and hope to lose. $10,000 on the table. Where do I send it?
Send it to 300 Funston.
Internet Archive. I'm going to vote yes, and I'm going to help try to make it come true. What does Alan Kay say? The best way of predicting the future is make it happen. Is let's go and come up. Let's take Raj's vision here and make it come true. Who should argue against a streamlined system where fair uses are easy, where compensation is understood, where there's registration and the actual copyrighted materials are in repositories that are long-term protected? Let's just do this thing. I mean, Raj, you're doing it again. So I'm going to vote yes, even if it costs me a dinner.
Brewster, it's been, let me point out that the bet against it is not being against the idea. It's against whether it happens by 2031.
Exactly, 10 years from now.
All right, so Vin, I want to ask you, since you've put $10,000 on the table, what do you think would prevent this vision from happening in the next decade?
Resistance in the publishing industry, the sluggish processes of government, a whole variety of things which impede progress.
Yeah, I agree with Vint. I still think it'll happen, but social systems are notoriously slow. They don't move very fast. And so it might happen in 20 years, but then so do many other things, where we know it's going to happen. It may take a little longer than we think.
All right, we have one for and one against. Others, place your bets.
I will stand on the side with Vint and betting against it. I'm not going to bet $10,000 though, because I think more valuable after the apocalypse will be this box of matches. So when all your blockchain is gone, you'll have these matches to help light the way. But I think also, I actually like some of the characteristics that Raj described there, because in a way, it reminds me of proposals to do collective licensing in published works, but with a lot more accountability to the creator or the rights holder side than I think I've seen in others. So it really has some merits there. But like Bent, I feel a little more pessimistic about social and legal change on this front. So,
Right, 2-1 against. Liz and Moriel.
Yeah, I don't know. I tried to think about this to prepare, and I'm kind of like, I'm flipping. Well, I can't really, if we're talking about the expensive restaurant in San Francisco, I work for a nonprofit. I don't know if I'll, maybe like a little tiny, like a salad in the beginning. So
Burrito.
yeah. So whichever side, I'm kind of like, well, but I don't know. I hope this will be true, but I'm kind of skeptical about the same kind of thing, like the process is. What I think might help this is that I think that the way that we think about a lot of this changes as we move on. We've seen this with, if you talk about even software, like it used to be that people would worry about, like, I can't put my software online because people will steal it. And now you see it all the time, and people don't really steal it. Like it's not really, like, it's not as horrible that people thought. And I think that we might potentially see something like that also happening with just the way that we think about works online and where to put them, which will maybe aid your vision in coming. So I'm hoping, I don't know, I'm going to put myself on the side of, sure, why not? It'll happen. And we'll just order. I won't be able to pay for the meal though. So
That's okay. Burritos are good too, Moriel. So 2 for and 2 against. And Liz, you get the tie-breaking vote.
I will go against my natural pessimism and vote for, because I would love to see that happen, especially considering the events of the past 18 months and all of the lessons that we hope will be able to be maintained more long-term about accessibility and access to materials. But Brewster, maybe you could spot me the money to put it.
Yeah, no problem. There's only a dinner at stake here, and I think that Raj and Vint are covering both sides of the dinner.
Right.
And I would like to extend it to other people out there in the audience here. Chime in a little bit on this, right? I mean, what does it take to actually make real progress on the big issue here, which is the institutional lethargy that's going on? How do we go and take the money that is in the system? Library system spends $12 billion a year. How do we go and spend that better than what we've been doing now, which we have almost nothing to show for it in terms of our collections being built? What's the way forward? How do we go and make it so that authors are compensated, that there's lots of winners? We want a game with lots of winners. That's what made the internet work, a decentralized system at its heart, the web work. And let's see if we can make the book publishing industry work better than it has. I think by showing the real value of digitizing that Google has done, that Raj, of course, did, that Michael Hart, all the people that came in this, the Internet Archive, all the scanning centers, the 500 libraries participating, we're showing the value. Now let's go and try to just make it so that it's not as frightening an environment.
Okay, everyone, put it in your calendars. August 2031, we're going to get back together and see if Raj Reddy has once again bet on the future and been prescient. He hasn't been wrong too often in the past. Finally, we have one last bit of business, and there is a gift that we have for Raj on his 20th anniversary of this project. So Brewster, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, well, Raj, I know that you're all about virtual, but we thought we'd make it physical, that we thought we would go and take the books, the million books that were digitized in India, and we made them and put them onto hard drives. And then I'm going to pass this book as a memento. So this is the text from the million books that we have from the libraries of India. And here I'm going to pass it up into the ether.
Thank you very much. This is great. Appreciate it.
Can you show us the hard drives? Because
Yes.
my virtual one didn't actually have them.
Here are the two hard drives. Here's one. Here is another one.
Did you ever imagine 1 million books would fit in the space of one book? I guess you probably did.
I think it will fit in one if you buy a 4 terabyte. You don't even need 2. Okay. Thank you very much, Brewster. This is great.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Raj. You better get cracking because you got to start reading those 1 million books now.
As Mike Sherman said, if I read a book every day, I can only read 30,000 books in my life. But I haven't read a book every day, maybe one every week or one every month. So I probably only read about 1,000 books in my lifetime. So, but I think we need robotic assistants, intelligent assistants, which will read all those books and give me appropriate quotations like you did in the Ngram example. That would be fantastic, so Ngram and other things, so that we can say, has anybody published anything about such and such? And out comes your robot, which has read about these things, understood it, and then not a robot, intelligent agent. That would be great.
Well, thank you so much for your leadership. From Gutenberg to the 1 Million Books Project, to the universities and the University of Toronto, to Google Books, to the Internet Archive and HathiTrust, and now into people's hands through Wikipedia. You have set in motion a tremendous, tremendous feat. So thank you.